The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Carl Jung. They say empaths love with a depth that feels almost otherworldly. They notice the trembling in your voice when you say, "I'm fine." They feel the heaviness in your silence, the storms you hide behind carefully chosen words. To be loved by an empath is to be seen, perhaps too deeply, in ways you never asked for, but secretly longed for. And yet, for all their tenderness, empaths carry within them a truth few dare to face. When they leave, they rarely give notice. There is no final argument, no storming out the door, no need for last words. They disappear quietly, like a shadow slipping from the room, leaving only an emptiness you cannot name. Why do they vanish without warning? And why, once they're gone, do they never return? To outsiders, their exit seems cruel. To those left behind, it feels sudden, almost heartless. But the empath's silence is not coldness. It is survival. They leave because something inside them has finally broken, and leaving is the only way to stitch themselves back together. Jung wrote that the soul demands wholeness, even if it means tearing down everything false. For the empath, leaving is not an act of abandonment toward others. It is an act of reclamation toward themselves. Their quiet departure is the echo of all the unspoken moments they endured, all the tiny fractures that piled up until staying became impossible. The empath's exit may feel like betrayal, but in truth, it is the beginning of their individuation, the becoming of who they truly are. They walk away not to wound, but to heal. And healing, for an empath, begins. Empaths are like rivers, always flowing, always taking the streams that pour into them. They absorb not only joy, but also sorrow, anger, and pain. A careless word can feel like a stone dropped into their waters, sending ripples through their entire being. They don't just listen to people, they feel them. And in that feeling, they often mistake compassion for responsibility. They begin to believe it is their role to carry the burdens others refuse to acknowledge. At first, this gift seems like love. They comfort, they heal, they pour themselves into others until those around them feel lighter. But what few notice is how heavy the empath becomes in the process. Every unspoken frustration, every unhealed wound, every manipulation cloaked as affection seeps into them. And because they are naturally forgiving, they dismiss the warning signs. It's not so bad, they tell themselves. I can handle it. But the truth is, no one can carry the emotions of the world without fracturing. Carl Jung warned of this danger when he spoke of the shadow. For empaths, their shadow often hides in plain sight. The part of them that longs to say no, but remains silent. The part that yearns for rest, but keeps giving. They repress this voice until the repression itself becomes unbearable. And so, the empath begins to dim. Their laughter grows quieter, their presence less radiant. They may still smile, still show up, but inside, the river has grown murky. No one sees the silent collapse, because empaths rarely announce their breaking. But the pressure builds, and the fractures widen. And when the breaking point comes, it does not come with warning. It comes with departure. Every empath has a threshold, though they rarely know where it lies until they cross it. For months, sometimes years, they endure more than most would tolerate. Hoping, believing, forgiving. They tell themselves that love means patience, that compassion demands sacrifice, that if they give enough, the other person will finally change. But there comes a moment when the weight they carry becomes too great, and the soul whispers a truth they can no longer ignore. If you stay, you will disappear. This breaking point often arrives quietly. There isn't always a dramatic betrayal or an explosive argument. Sometimes it is as small as a look of indifference when they are at their most vulnerable, or the realization that their kindness has become an expectation rather than a gift. Other times, it comes after one wound too many, the final crack in a heart already webbed with fractures. Whatever form it takes, the result is always the same. Something within them snaps, not in anger, but in clarity. Jung wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." For the empath, the relationship that once felt like home now feels like a cage. The constant giving, the silence, the invisible labor of holding everyone else together, it begins to suffocate them. And in that suffocation, they awaken when this moment arrives. Leaving is not a choice made with the mind. It is a necessity demanded by the soul. The empath walks away, not to punish, not to teach a lesson, but to save themselves from vanishing entirely. And once they recognize that truth, there is no turning back. When empaths finally decide to leave, it rarely comes with words. They don't sit down to explain their reasons or make a list of grievances. They don't announce their exit in anger. They slip away almost invisibly, and to those left behind, it feels like a vanishing act. But their silence is not cruelty. It is the only language they have left. Why no warning? Because warnings were given long before, though not in words. They appeared in the weary look in their eyes, in the subtle withdrawal of their laughter, in the way their body grew tense when promises were broken again. They tried countless times to express their pain indirectly, through patience, through second chances, through forgiveness. But when none of it was truly seen, they realized explanations would only fall into the same void, where all their other feelings had gone unheard. Carl Jung once wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." For empaths, this is the heart of their silence. They leave quietly because they know words will not bridge the chasm that has grown between them and those they once gave everything to. And there is another truth. When an empath departs, they have already endured far more than they should. To stay long enough to explain would mean opening themselves to yet another wound. Instead, they can serve what little strength remains. Silence becomes their shield. Disappearance becomes their closure. To the one abandoned, it feels sudden. To the empath, it is a final act of self-preservation. After years of unspoken suffering, their silence is not emptiness. It is survival. When an empath leaves, many expect that one day they will come back. After all, they are the forgiving ones, the healers, the souls who always give second chances. But this is the great misunderstanding. The departure of an empath is not like anyone else's. When they walk away, they close the door forever. Why? Because returning would mean re-entering the very cycle that nearly destroyed them. They know that if they go back, the same patterns will repeat, the same expectations, the same neglect of their needs, the same silent exhaustion that once drained the life from them. To return would be to betray themselves once more. And the empath's awakening has made that impossible. Carl Jung wrote of individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole by uniting their conscious self with what was hidden in the unconscious. For empaths, leaving is the moment they step into this individuation. They finally integrate the part of themselves they long denied, the part that demands boundaries, rest, and self-respect. To go back would be to undo that hard-won wholeness. And so, the empath becomes like a bridge burned, not out of anger, but out of necessity. They may still hold love in their heart. They may still wish well to those they left behind, but they will not return, because the cost of returning is too high. The cost is themselves. This is why their departure feels permanent, almost like a disappearance into another world. Once they've chosen themselves, they cannot unsee the truth. The door behind them is sealed, not by pride, not by hatred, but by self-preservation. When an empath leaves, it is not a pause. It is an ending. And endings for them are absolute. When an empath finally walks away, their story does not end there. In fact, it is only the beginning. The silence that once felt like emptiness becomes a sanctuary. The absence that others interpret as coldness becomes a ground where they plant themselves anew. For the first time in years, they are no longer carrying the weight of everyone else's pain. And this release feels like learning to breathe again. At first, it is disorienting. They are so used to living through others that they almost don't know who they are without the constant demands. The quiet feels unfamiliar, almost frightening. But slowly it shifts. The quiet becomes peace. The emptiness becomes possibility. Carl Jung taught that transformation begins when we stop running from ourselves and instead turn inward. This is what happens to the empath after leaving. They no longer drown in the noise of others' emotions. They finally have space to hear their own, and in those moments of solitude, they meet themselves again, the self they abandoned long ago, in their need to be everything for everyone. This rebirth is not dramatic. It does not come with fireworks or grand revelations. It comes with small moments. The joy of saying no without guilt, the relief of rest without apology, the discovery that their worth does not depend on how much they give. These small moments weave together into something larger, a life that finally belongs to them. And as they rebuild, the empath becomes stronger, not harder. They do not lose their compassion, but they anchor it in self-respect. Their love does not disappear. It deepens because now it includes themselves. This is the quiet miracle of their departure. Leaving others was, in truth, the first time they chose not to leave themselves. When an empath leaves, their absence does more than create silence. It creates a mirror. Those who are left behind often feel confused, abandoned, even betrayed. They replay old conversations, searching for clues, asking themselves, why didn't they say anything? Why didn't they give me one more chance? But the truth is, the empath's departure is the answer. It forces those left behind to confront what they refuse to see, while the empath was still present. Empaths are often the emotional backbone of relationships. They give stability, forgiveness, and unconditional presence. When that is suddenly gone, the void feels unbearable. And in that void lies the lesson, the recognition of all that was taken for granted. Carl Jung reminded us that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The disappearance of an empath carries this very invitation. It is a chance for the other to ask, why do they feel unseen with me? Why did they need to vanish to survive? What part of myself have I been refusing to face? Some, of course, never take this lesson. They blame the empath, labeling them cold or selfish. But those willing to look inward discover something transformative. That love cannot be sustained by one person endlessly giving, while the other endlessly receives. The empath's departure reveals the imbalance, the unspoken truths, the shadows in a relationship that could no longer be ignored. In this way, the empath's absence becomes its own kind of teaching. They do not return to explain, but their silence explains everything. They do not stay to fix, but their leaving exposes what was broken. Their greatest gift is not only in their presence, but sometimes in their absence. Carl Jung believed that the central task of human life is individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating the hidden and denied parts of ourselves. For empaths, this journey often begins the moment they decide to walk away. Until then, they live in one-sidedness, giving without balance, listening without being heard, holding space for others while abandoning themselves. Their identity becomes fused with service, as though their existence is only validated through sacrifice. But individuation demands something different. It asks the empath to turn inward, to meet the parts of themselves they have ignored, their anger, their exhaustion, their need for boundaries, their longing for rest. These are pieces of their shadow, the truths they push aside because they feared they would make them unlovable. Yet in Jung's vision, embracing the shadow is not weakness, but liberation. To face it is to finally become whole. When the empath leaves, they begin this integration. By refusing to carry what is not theirs, they reclaim their strength. By choosing silence over explanation, they honor the voice within. And by refusing to return, they affirm that their existence does not depend on pleasing others. This is individuation in action, the merging of the tender heart with a strong boundary, the union of compassion with self-respect. The world may misinterpret this transformation as coldness, but it is, in truth, maturity. The empath does not stop feeling deeply. They simply learn to feel themselves as well. They do not stop loving. They love with greater clarity, because now their love includes the one person they once neglected, themselves. In walking away, the empath does not abandon their gift. They embody it more fully. Their journey is no longer about dissolving into others. It is about standing whole, radiant, and unbroken. The story of the empath is often misunderstood. From the outside, their sudden silence can look like betrayal, their refusal to return like cruelty. But beneath the surface lies something far more human, far more profound, the courage to finally choose themselves. Empaths are not weak because they feel deeply. Their depth is their strength. But even strength has limits, and the quiet act of walking away is often the bravest choice they will ever make. It is not a rejection of love. It is a redefinition of it. For the first time, their love is directed inward, toward the very soul they spent years neglecting. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For the empath, leaving without warning and never returning is the doorway to this privilege. It is a threshold where they stop being defined by others' needs and begin to live in the fullness of their own being. Those who are left behind may feel abandoned, but the empath's silence is not meant as punishment. It is a message written in absence. See what was invisible, value what was taken for granted, awaken to what love truly requires. Whether others hear that message or not is beyond the empath's control. What matters is that they have finally heard themselves. And so, their quiet exit becomes their quiet strength. Not dramatic, not cruel, not vengeful, simply necessary. They do not return because they have stepped into a life where returning is no longer possible. Empaths leave without warning and they never return, because in leaving, they have finally arrived home to themselves,